Hey, what's up? And welcome to another podcast with WODprep. This is the warm-up. You might notice that we are one member down, as Ben is hunting out in the forest somewhere. But we are joined by Dr. CJ De Palma and obviously our head of happiness, Savannah. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
Okay, so today we are going to be deep and dive into the big announcement that has happened literally 24 hours ago, that the CrossFit Games has moved to Texas. And then we are also and we're also in preseason, so we're going to go into what athletes, CrossFitters should be focusing on over the next sort of 12 to 16 weeks, and what that should look like. But first, the CrossFit Games being in Texas. How does everybody feel about that?
I just want to make it clear in case everyone didn't know. I don't know if anyone posted about it, but it's going to be hot. In case anyone didn't.
Update, newsflash.
Just guys, this is so crazy. It's going to be really hot. It was really hot in Madison. It's going to be hotter in Texas. But also that leads into other pieces of that we'll get into in a bit. But it's in Fort Worth. It's at the Dickies Arena, which is a huge concert event arena, which is inside, by the way, in case anyone didn't understand. Inside.
I mean, because I remember, the games this year was 30 degrees, which is like 90 Fahrenheit this year. And then when Joe, one of the WODprep coaches, was living in Texas this games, and he was saying to me it was like 40 or 110.
Yeah.
And that was like the minimum. And the games athletes this year at Madison, they were struggling with the heat at the much lower temperature.
Yeah.
Like that's like you said, the stadium's indoors.
Correct.
Can they do anything outdoors?
Yeah, so if you Google Maps the Dickies Arena, right? So Dickies Arena is a 14,000 seats center, right? So concerts and events in general, right? They do a lot of like cowboy stuff there, bull riding and horse racing and all that kind of stuff. That's what it does a lot. And so it is inside. And if you look around the area, if you go to Google Maps, right there really isn't much. There's a big parking lot. But what a lot of people don't know is that at the Alliance Center is that concrete pad where the turf was built by CrossFit. That was just uneven pavement before. Because the Alliance Center, one of their biggest things is like a huge ranch type thing, right? Cows come in and animals and like a fair type of thing. And so that's a huge thing there. But they built that cement block pad that the turf laid on. And then none of that is there when we're not there, right? The cement pad stayed there while the time we're there.
And stands, you mean? Like the stand, they obviously assemble those stands out there.
Correct. So the Dickies Arena is substantially larger than the Alliance Center. The Alliance Center sits 5,000. The arena sits 14. At any given time, there's probably 25,000 people in the games, maybe closer to 20. So it's going to be a lot more people are going to be able to sit, which is going to be a good thing, right? I think the way that it kind of looks like it's starting to show is that it's very possible that all of it will be inside, or most of it will be inside on one field of play, right? Very similar to like regionals or semifinals, which I think would be a disservice too. But on that same note, there are, 20,000 parking spots available in a parking lot right there. So there's easily things that can be built and areas to be ran. There is also a football field less than half a mile away, an artificial turf football field that sits, it's called Farrington Field, and it sits, probably 20,000 people as well, right? It's a concrete. So very similar to the StubHub Center. You had the tennis
The soccer
stadium,
stadium.
you had the football stadium. It's within distance. It's walking distance from there. And I could definitely see something happening there as well. There's a lot of things that are right there. There's also a tiny, it's called the John Justin Arena, which is that's in between both of those. That's another, I don't know, horse racing, whatever, right? Cow riding or bull riding, a venue. Easily could do something in there. We had a huge event down in Miami that was on a dirt kind of platform thing, and it sits a lot of people in a ton, there's, I don't know, 4,000 seats in there, right? So there's options, there's things to do. And so I think they're very aware that if they try to host super aggressive events outside, people will be at risk of injury. And I think they understand that. And I think that they can work around it.
Yeah, they know. They take that. They take that into consideration.
So there's a lot of options that are right there. There's a lot of footprint that is usable. There's a huge trailhead that run right past the Dickies Arena for a good long run. There's no water anywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, noticeably, there's only like a bit of a river canal, but that's not like safe.
Maybe a pool though.
Yeah, I don't see anything close. Let's see.
No, when I was doing the same thing, scanning around for.
I think TCU is near there, which is a college, Texas Christian University, and so it's very possible they could. Oh, there's a pool across the street.
There you go.
Oh no, it's not. That's cleaning.
Interesting.
No, it's a cleaning service. Oh, it might be a pool. No, it's a cleaning service.
No, it's a cleaning service. Yeah.
Okay, so but what we're saying is there may be a possibility that the swim event will still be there. It would just be pool based.
It'll for sure be pool based. There's no real open water swimming in Texas like that. So, or maybe there's just isn't swimming for a while.
CJ, what about the dates announced? I think two things on that. One is it's a week later, starting the 8th through the 11th. And then two, I think it's been suggested.
The 4th through the 8th. 8th through the 11th?
To the 11th.
Okay. All right.
And then it's been suggested those shorter dates also are another indicator that the teens and the masters may not be during that same window. First, let's just talk about the week. Do you think that matters at all 1 week later in the season, or is that a small enough difference that it's really negligible?
I mean, it's been later. Usually it just kind of falls on the weekends. It's probably more specific to do with the venue and the availability of the venue than the specificity of why the event is a week later, right? They have the Alliance Center for like 3 weeks to prepare for it, right? They're obviously not going to have it for that. You can't have a venue like this for that long. It would cost way too much money. So the 8th through the 11th is 4 days, right? 4 days of individual and team competition. Now, with that being said, 2 years ago, it was 4 days as well, right? Like in 2019, they ran it the same way. Everyone started.
Right.
Individuals started Wednesday. They rested Thursday. Masters started Thursday, Sunday. So it's still possible. Now, the biggest thing is how many fields of play will there be? Okay. So, and what I mean by that is competition floor in Madison. We had the North Park and we had the Coliseum. So there's two at a time, which means something can be going on at the same time. If everything is inside the Dickies Arena, there's absolutely no way that masters and teams will be there at the same time. But like we just laid out, there's a park right there, right? They can find flat ground, okay? When you bring value to things like that, hey, we're going to pour a beautiful cement slab and give you a 50 by 20 turfed field that's just going to stay here, out here, right? No park is going to be like, nah, we don't want that, right? So if they could easily rework some of the park that's across the street. It's there. It's possible for them to build something and bring something in to create other competition floors. But now we're talking about the heat and those other limitations, etc. And so 4 days is also not 5 days either, which is what it was before. But they ran 4 days straight this year, right? They didn't have the rest day at all. At least the individuals didn't. So it's very possible that it's there, and it's kind of that's what it might be. But the rumor mill has been strong. The rumor mill was very right about Texas, and the rumor mill does say that the Masters and teens will be at another time and place, most likely, which stinks. It does. There's no other way around it.
And Savannah, you spotted Boz somewhere.
Oh, not me personally. It was posted that he was at the Pit Teen Ranch where the Pit Teen Throwdown is.
Dave was at NorCal, which was last week as well. So, I think the biggest thing is this is regardless of what happens, if the Masters and the age groups and adaptives are not with the regular games, it's going to be a deflating moment in our sport for sure, right? 100% across the board. But on the flip side of that, there is no professional sport that has Masters and adaptives that are working at the same time in the same light on the same everything. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Masters. Anyone listening to this podcast knows that me and WODprep as a whole, are the biggest Masters supporters in the CrossFit space across the board. But
I think it's just the change of it. I think if it had always been that way, nobody would bat an eye. Like, not at all. Yeah. It's just that the change of it is what ruffles feathers. But there is a huge supporting stance from people who are, I think, a little bit excited. I think that we touched on it last time, and I've seen it a few times just scrolling through social media, that they're like, if it changes, this could be a good thing. Maybe they'll get the coverage that they deserve. It will be proper coverage. The people who want to see them will be able to see them. So that the support for the teens and for the Masters, at least for their fan base, may have a better experience directly.
Yeah. 100%. And then, so even so within this 1 square mile, okay, 1 square mile, I'm still sitting on this. There's 4 memorial centers, 4 venues for events, big venues. Okay. It could easily just be that the Masters are on they're there. They're just not in the Dickies Arena. Very similar to 2019 when all the Masters were inside of the, I don't know, whatever that
training center, workout area. Yeah,
where the spectator workout was this year. One year that was all of the Masters events were inside there or on North Park. And so there's enough parking, there's enough facilitation that it's there. It's right there. They could easily be in one of those. Everyone could use the football stadium interchangeably, and the Dickies Arena could be where the main, like, our, Coliseum is, or tennis stadium or whatever, right? With 14,000 seats instead of 5,000, right? Which is how many the Coliseum sat. And so, Coliseum.
That's crazy.
8,000.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Coliseum sat 8,000 or 9,000. So it's possible, right? It's still definitely possible. But no matter what it is, I will always side with CrossFit, and I will say I'm optimistic that they have the best for the sport in their mind, right?
They have a vision, yeah.
The goal is to grow always, and just because things change doesn't mean it's not a good sign of growth and direction. And like you said, it's very possible that people could get more coverage. There could be more, I think there's a lot of options and directions that it could go, and I hope that it's just going to go, and I'm optimistic that it's going to be positive for everybody, right? So let's run out.
Okay, well, I have one more question on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
It was mentioned that this step to Dallas is also a step to bringing the games internationally.
Sure.
Do you think that's interpreted as we can't stay in the same location, we need to move around because we need to be able to execute the quality of the games and navigate different cities? Like, it's almost like you need to be able to be malleable or flexible to be able to say, okay, we're going to be here. Yes, we can totally do that. We don't need to be stuck on our same locations, and we can do it here. And yes, we can do that. And just having that flexibility. Do you think that's the angle of that statement?
Well, I think travel's one, right? So I think they wanted to finally do it or they wanted to get back to a true metropolitan, because if they go to Europe, everywhere is going to be like this and not going to be like Madison, right? For the most part, anywhere that's going to be able to fit 20,000 people, right? Like, there's plenty of farmland and everywhere in the world, but to have a place like this, the States are very unique in having huge venues that don't have big populations around them, and so I think that has a lot to do with it. But yes, it does very much. Dave's comment of starting to prepare might mean that the games are going to move more frequently, so they need to figure out how to get set up in a 2 to 3 year time span, spend 2 to 3 years there, and then move. And basically, almost like apparel, right? Apparel will prepare 1 to 2 year launches out, right? Like, they'll be 2 years ahead of their season drops, and so like I think it's something like that you'll have a whole team preparing for the next games or the next location while this one's being executed.
Yeah,
right? It could easily be that, and I think that would be amazing and super beneficial to the growth of the sport.
I mean, I've just quickly Googled because you just obviously mentioning about the stadium size, because the only other sort of touring big competitions like this is the Olympics and the Commonwealth and the World Champs, and usually all of these sports facilities is on all of the Olympic facilities,
right?
So I was just like, well, how big is the Olympics facilities? They're about 50,000. They seat 50,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think so. By upping the stadium size and the location, that's my bet somewhere they would go.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
how
for
they
sure.
be
Especially in Europe, they would need it. The game, like, we have a little bit of like, I don't want to say like CrossFit fatigue, but there is, right? Like, there's like some, there's like the oomph isn't quite as much, right? Like, in 2000 and it's still growing. But if you took this in Europe, with how condensed the population is and how many people are in such a close area and how easy it is to travel 1,000 miles in Europe compared to how hard it is to travel 1,000 miles in the States, I think they could easily fill like a track stadium or a soccer stadium in Europe, right? Maybe not like
that would be crazy.
There's something 100,000, but like a 50,000, a normal size soccer stadium or a normal size track and field stadium, like for the Olympics in Greece or like wherever, it's very possible for sure.
Just places like I put my bets on like Germany, for example, because they're centrally located. Like you said, we have incredible train systems. You just jump on a train, you can get there in 2-3 hours. You can drive there for a few hours down all the toll roads and things. Right. It's perfectly placed to be the next location.
Yeah, and I have one more. I agree. I have one more thing. So, Talking Elite Fitness put a podcast out about like restructuring the games season. I haven't listened to it yet. I do want to listen to it because they talked about it a couple of years ago. Tommy usually has a pretty good grasp on that kind of stuff. But I think the game season has to stay exactly the way that it is, because if it doesn't, and they take away, so now say the Masters are different. It's not at the CrossFit Games, it's their own thing. They have to do the open quarterfinals and semifinals as they are now. And I think they will continue for sure for the individuals. I think the things that we will see change in the near future are potentially these like pro cards and athletes getting buys on maybe the open or quarterfinals based on placings of the games the years prior. Like the top 10 will get an automatic bid to a semifinal or something like that. I can see that happening because that's very much Justin Berg referenced golf and tennis all of the time, right? And if golf is the thing, then you don't have to qualify, right? You just get invited to these events. And so I can see that being the case in professionalizing the sport. But I do see the Open and quarterfinals and semifinals standing for the Masters as is without change. Maybe the only difference, maybe opening it to 20, right? That's the other thing. If the Masters are at a separate location, a separate time, there will 100% be 20 athletes in every age group going, without a doubt. Maybe even 30 in the 35s and 40s. So a positive with potentially changing venues or whatever.
I think I would be sad if there was that pro card scenario. I understand, like,
really.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because I think I understand, like, separating it, making it more of a professional sport, and then like more like two separate things, right? Like one is like community competition, blah 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 blah. Okay, but like it is the coolest thing to do the same thing.
Sure.
It could direct comparison to like the best of the best. And there are not many scenarios that you get to do that. And I think that's what makes it like, that's such a cool thing. And it helps you have perspective on how incredible the athletes are, because you can look at a workout and you can look at their times and you can understand that it's really fast. But if you also do the exact same thing and you know how it felt for you, and you can really like compare apples to apples, I just think it's this really neat thing that just like shows an incredible perspective. And I think that you get to do it once a year. And if you're lucky, you get to do it twice a year through the season, depending on how competitive you are and how far you're making it. And I love that. And so I would just be a little sad because I like that.
I mean, I get it. I completely get it, because you do. Everybody looks like who the fastest times are and what did they do.
Sure.
But I think it's that, again, evolution of the sport. I don't think the top like 40 or top 20 should get a pro card, but something about the top 10. Like, or even like if let's say you've qualified for the games more than 3 times or 5 times, then that's how you get your pro card. Because as some people have identified, you can have there can just be a freak year where all the workouts just came in your wheelhouse and suddenly you got to the games. But that doesn't mean you qualify next year for the games, or you might just get to semi-finals but you got these long-standing games athletes like Annie Thorsdottir and Katrin and wow, names just got in my head. But anyway,
all those people that we know, all those athletes that we know all their stats, but their names are gone. Okay. But if that were to happen, now I just wanted to kind of like go down a little like rabbit hole here. If that were to happen, then those athletes would be at a great advantage because they wouldn't be training. I know that those athletes are training through like the Open, right? Like they're training through some, right? They're not peaking for those smaller qualification sections, but they wouldn't even have to have them on their radar,
right,
for their year. And so then would they like continuously be at an advantage?
They would. And so that's the whole point of like the cards. And if you look at golf, golf, they'll just use golf as the example. And this includes like motocross and things like that as well. The ones that are working their way up the ranks are tired, they're beat up, and they are at a disadvantage. But they can get to that advantage and they can get to that point. In golf, there are multiple minor league tours. Okay. There's like, before you get to the PGA. But even once you get to the PGA tour, right, you're not guaranteed into every event based on your ranking throughout. Even if you have a PGA card, there's still some events that you have to either qualify for or be invited to. But when you're in the Corn Ferry Tour, which is like the one below, there are some that have a card, but the ones that are basically, there's open qualification to pretty much every event. They will literally travel 40 weeks out of the year. They finish playing on Sunday if they didn't get cut. They have Monday to travel, and they start qualifications on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then if they make it for Wednesday, then the event starts on Thursday. And they do that nonstop for like 70% of the year. And I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, but a lot of sports run it like this. Tennis is very similar, trying to work your way up into the ranks, getting invited, being in the top, 64 or whatever, right? There's a qualification process. And so, yeah, it's common, right? It's not, it wouldn't be out of left field. Some of the sanctional flow, I think, has some value to it too, of like, here, if you make this, if you win this event, if you win Rogue, you get a semifinal spot, and, I don't know, like the whole backfill thing and whatnot was kind of confusing, but, yeah, it's a way to continue to make it seem like a real sport. So I'd be in favor of, but I do agree that, one of the beauties of what we do is to do exactly what Tia and Justin and Jeff and Roman are doing, right? Laura, etc. Right? That's really cool. But if that's the sacrifice, or maybe they still do it, maybe they get incentive from their sponsors to still do it and still do the announcements and things like that and put their name on a leaderboard. They just don't have to be overly concerned. Most of them do
the results.
Fun, right? Because they know they're going to make a quarterfinal. No one cares about the leaderboard at quarterfinals, right? No one, right? The amount of people that do it, if they did, everyone that qualified would sign up, and they don't, right?
Right.
You have about 70%, maybe even less, of people that total qualify for quarterfinals that actually pay the $50 registration and do it. So maybe the Open, all the athletes still do it for fun, right? They all love to compete. They all love to work hard. That's a good time frame to kind of like see where you're at. Maybe they all still do it anyways, right? And then quarterfinals, they skip. That's a beatdown weekend, right? 5 workouts, 6 workouts in 48 hours or 72 hours, and then they get ready for semifinals. So who knows?
Okay, next question.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this might segue a little bit into us talking about CrossFit season and what a season looks like.
Nah, let's talk about
it doesn't have to. Even though those athletes do train through the Open, for sure, the Open workouts, I think, have had this like very similar feel over the years, and it's obviously not the same as games training. With the entire year, let's say you got a pro card and you didn't have to do any of those qualifiers, would your entire year of training be entirely different, because then you are training just for game style events, which are different than semifinals, and you could throw the Open in there as well. Like, they're entirely different.
Sure. Well, I think the theory would be they go to semifinals, which still has more of that like openish flow. But yeah, it definitely would, right? I mean, you would be very specific into weakness driven training for an extended portion of the year. And then, and then I also think it depends on who's programming, right? Like with Dave programming, you still see very traditional CrossFit, barbell, cycling, gymnastic pieces at the games, right? It's not the total of the games, and you'd swim more throughout the year. You'd probably run more throughout the year as well, which people should be doing anyways, right? I think people kind of alter their training maybe too. If they know they're going to make it to the games, I think a lot of them alter their training probably too much because they're really worried about where they're going to end up on a leaderboard. And so if you know your goal and where you're trying to train for, training should probably be anyways.
You could probably make larger strides on your weaknesses.
I think you would, right? Like you can only really prepare for some of that stuff for 3 to 4 months, right? And so that would give you, 6 months to really, 6 to 7 months to really hammer in, I don't know, running like Adler, right? Adler's like, I don't lift a heavy weight. He knew he was going to make it, and he looked great. He held up his weaknesses, and he could easily be a perennial winner at this point. I think it should, just like anything, right? Any type of event or whatever, you work on your weaknesses all year, and you let your skills and your past fitness to take you to that point.
So now I'm talking about so that was obviously like talking about the elite athletes. Now talking to the average Joes like us who are just looking to maybe get a better score in the Open, just be a better, really reach the potential of RXing CrossFit. Now we call this pre-season because the games are over. The Open only starts in February, so this is obviously the off time of the year. What are the first things that they should be looking to do to improve their Open score from this point in the year?
Yeah, so we're in September when this is released, so we have 5 months until the Open starts. 5.5. I don't know, is it 6 months to the middle of February right now? 5 months. Yeah, 5 months. So we have 5 months, right? So usually that's like
not gonna lie, I just counted on my fingers under the table.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. December.
Yeah.
So we've had, for every athlete, we just assume we're talking from the end of quarterfinals. So we've had 4 months of training to this point for the season. Usually early in the season, we do a lot of very general fitness work, shoring up our aerobic weaknesses and our strength weaknesses. And so as we start to get to this time in the year, what Charlie calls preseason, so now we're kind of at a preseason, it should start looking a lot more sports specific. So a lot of people want to dig right into, as soon as the Open is done, they want to get the skills that they don't have. And that's a really good idea, but you just want to make sure you have the prerequisites to have those skills, right? So this year, the Open changed a lot compared to the last 3 years. And so we see the higher skill complexes and movement patterns coming back into play. And so what that means is, if you have a muscle up or you don't have a muscle up, it's 10,000 spots in the leaderboard. Okay. So you should probably work on the low hanging fruits of skills that you don't have. That comes with a massive caveat though, because if you can't do 5 strict pull-ups, you shouldn't work on muscle ups. And if you can't snatch anywhere near, as a female, we'll say 80% of your body weight, as a male, your body weight, strength is still a bigger driver and more important than muscle up, right? So you need to look at your Open scores or quarterfinals or whatever you got to, and you need to look at where they ranked, okay? You can see each rank based on a percentage in your app, or you can see each rank based on a flat number. The higher the number, that's the worst implement that you have or modality, and that should be your lowest hanging fruit. For most people, it is strength over the gymnastic skills. It really is. Everyone wants to do cool things and fun things. And if you feel like you are strong, then your next low-hanging fruit should be getting at least 1 rep of those skills, right? So going through, selfless plug, a WODprep course to get 1 rep of those skills is key. Not just taking swings at muscle ups and doing Amanda every week, learning a skill while also continuing to get stronger. Okay, so now that we're there, we've established that's what people should probably do. Everyone should probably get stronger. Ironically, the 2 girls on the other side of the screen are 2 athletes that don't really need to worry about getting stronger. Savannah's, so just for context, Savannah's would be getting muscle ups, right? Getting gymnastic skills and volume. And Charlie's would probably be improving longer endurance-based workouts. Her pure gymnastic work is really good in getting gymnastics volume, right? And so everyone's a little bit different, but these 2 girls are exceptionally strong, so they don't have to worry about strength. Should they still do strength and still work on it? Of course. So it's a huge
because
part.
It's the best.
And it's
so much fun.
It's the best.
It's you got their chest out a little bit, like, look
Yeah.
how
I've been benching. Can you tell? I'm back to bench.
That's right. Well, I don't like the screen because the screen is narrow. It's in a portrait. And I was trying to light flare and you couldn't see it. So, and so, theirs is going to be gymnastics skill acquisition. And then at this point in the year, hopefully they've worked on those skills. They've got the new skill that they needed. Now it's time to accumulate volume in those new skills, right? And that's where we are in this time of the year, is really getting a lot of muscle contraction volume in CrossFit movement patterns. So lots of chest to bars by themselves and starting to increase volume there. Not working at those movements under a lot of fatigue just yet, just accumulating a lot of volume to increase our tissue, our joints, shoulders, elbows, wrists, knees, ability to do this stuff when we're mixing it with heavy weights and a lot of heavy breathing, etc. So we learn the skill, we get the strength, learn the skill, and now we're accumulating the volume of said skills, which is for pretty much everyone, all of our gymnastic skills, and starting to increase our exposure to CrossFit movement patterns, thrusters, and wall balls, again, by doing this to accumulate a lot of volume. I'll pause there for a second because that was a lot to digest. So we're in volume accumulation right now. So we've learned the skills. Now we're starting to do the skills in volume to build our tissue tolerance to more training and more intensity as we get closer to the CrossFit Open.
And so just if people maybe don't know what volume is, what would that practically look like?
Yeah, so for something like a chest to bar or bar muscle up or muscle up, once we have the skill, early in the season, I personally like to avoid a lot of the kipping gymnastics and dynamic patterns to give our joints a little bit of a rest. And we still train strength, still train a lot of pulling strength, or we still train the foundations of all of these skill movements, right? To help our tissues be ready to do them in volume. And so now we start to increase how often we're doing things like butterfly chest to bars or bar muscle ups or high volume kipping handstand push-ups. So this time of the year, you'll see a lot more of I call it like chunk work. So like almost looks like chipper type numbers where we do a lot of volume of single rep or like single movement type things. And so we do that. Also seen, I think, and this is a very individual bias, not consistent with CrossFit or even a lot of the bigger camps. I think people that are very comfortable doing super high volume muscle ups really fresh are going to be better off mixing them in, right? If you only touch gymnastic movements in volume, in chippers and AMRAPs and mixed like couplets and triplets, etc., the way that you attack movements will either always stay the same or it will plateau, right? So you'll always do 5s on muscle ups, or you'll always do 3s on strict handstand push-ups because you see them in a workout, and that's kind of how it goes. So I really, really like to do a lot of volume accumulation and then a lot of just for time. So 5-minute AMRAPs of strict handstand push-ups or 4-minute AMRAP of chest bar, 4-minute AMRAP chest bars, that's a lot of chest bars, 3-minute AMRAP of chest bars, or 30 muscle ups per time. And I think they have a really big carryover. It's not as sexy and it's not as cool as doing like Amanda or 18.5, right, thrusters and chest to bars, right, but doing 50 thrusters into 5-minute rest, 50 chest to bars, like it's just going to be a little bit different stimulus, and it's going to really get you ready to do even rounds for time, right? 50 and 50 is way more mentally taxing than 5 rounds of 10 and 10, right? And so
sure. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So by doing that, you're forcing the athletes to have a varied approach and also be under more fatigue than they would normally be under?
Yeah, I think it's very specific fatigue, right? So they're still doing the movement solo by itself. So the fatigue is there, right?
Right.
So doing double unders and then chest to bars, right? And so we're still in a volume accumulation phase. We turn that volume accumulation into like a single modality fatigue, right? And that's a very arbitrary term, but that's the way that I look at it. And so by doing so, I think when you see smaller chunks of work, even mixed with other movement patterns, I think it's going to make them more mentally digestible too, right?
Yeah.
And I say this, and so there's a lot of people that follow our program in our online training plan. We don't do that a lot in our online training plan. And I'm going to tell you why, because I want to defend myself before we get that feedback. A lot of our athletes are still in a lot of skill acquisition concepts. right? So we can't give 60 chest to bars per time to most of our training, or even 60 pull-ups per time, right? And so you still see a lot of mixed work there. But what you do see a lot of in ours is what we feel the group needs the most of, which is a lot of pacing work, right? And still just getting lots and lots and lots of touches on gymnastic patterns, lots of knee flexion type movements and things like that. So they're still in that kind of volume accumulation phase. You have to be at a certain skill level and capacity level to kind of train like this. And so, yeah, so there's always a lot of CrossFit's really challenging to program for because there's so many different variables and everyone's a little bit different. It's also why one is always superior to templated training.
I mean, so there's two things really to touch on. Templated training. What are the problems with templated training, and what is it more importantly?
Sure. So in case anyone didn't know, this wasn't on our topic at all, but it's a good question, right? So we have a templated program and we love it. We're obviously extremely biased and we do the best that we can. The problem with a template is it's just that. It's not written for you. It doesn't focus on your weaknesses, and there's challenge points for everyone. Everyone's going to need to adjust. So we do our best to write a program that is adjustable naturally, right? So here at WODprep, we don't really RX or scale any weights. And we even go into giving ranges of gymnastic reps. And so you'll see that kind of phase in and out depending on how everyone is doing and where our athletes' skill levels are and things like that. So, but a template program, we'll go back. A template program is the group program, right? So you see, it's like one program that's written for the
all
max.
of us will follow it.
Yes.
CJ and Charlie and I are all going to follow the same programming.
Right. And so challenges with that is it's written for the masses, which means that we will write very much exactly like what we think this time of the year should be. And based on the standard, the single, the one standard deviation from the mean or the median, as like our driving point, right? Which means that we'll have outliers that need different things all the time, which stinks for them, right? But you hopefully create a plan that's a little bit adjustable and individualizable for them. And you hope that you teach them well enough to make the adjustments in the program, which is why we try to avoid RX and scaled, because when you write a stimulus-based focus, then everyone can hopefully meet the stimulus, and then we've created an individualized template program, right? Which is very challenging to do because everyone has to stroke that ego and get on that leaderboard and make sure they beat Mary and stomp on the ground and use the same weights, or we use the same weights and then lost a 10-minute workout by 40 minutes and it took us an hour, which is funny, but it happens. And people are like, oh, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I've seen someone do Diane in like 30 minutes before. And I was like, all right, well,
don't do that again.
What are we doing here, right? So
don't do that again.
Right? Even though you clicked RX. So there's limits for sure in template programming, but we try to be very introspective with what we're writing and critical based on the results that we receive every week to adjust that on the fly.
And then for the majority of the CrossFit community who are, we're talking about preseason as if you're looking towards the Open and peaking and doing the best score then. Majority of the CrossFitters in our community do the class. What can they do to supplement the class to get those better scores?
Yeah. Again, I think that comes down to the skill, right? If you don't have a certain skill, you need to get it. Right, muscle ups or chest to bars or strict handstand push-ups or maybe handstand walks. That's like a 50-50. You don't know. It could be. I mean, we had super fatigued squat snatches or heavy snatches in the Open, which haven't literally never had snatches under that much fatigue in the Open ever. Right. So it's hard to say what a movement is, but there is an order of operations in general. Okay. So if you're an athlete, like what do I work on next? Right. So you work on your prerequisite strengths to do all the gymnastic skills. If you're confident you have the prerequisite strengths, then it goes kipping pull-ups, toes to bar, and kipping handstand push-ups. All of those are probably on the same level. and it's chest to bars. Well, it's probably chest to bars, toes to bar, because you will usually we see chest to bars in the open and not pull ups. So chest to bars, toes to bar, handstand push ups. Then you have strict handstand push ups, bar muscle ups, handstand walks. And so in that order, somewhere, wherever you are, you have one skill, go to the next one, and make sure you have that skill, and then start to once you have the skill, start to accumulate volume in the skill. And you can do that with, if you're trying to learn the skill, we have a lot of options here at WODprep. If you're trying to accumulate volume in the skill, we also have a lot of options here at WODprep with accessory courses. And in our training plan, we have fixed link tracks to help kind of teach some of these movements. But I won't selfless plug anymore. Once you have the skill, you can completely just accumulate volume by doing small EMOMs of singles or doubles, and then go to triples, 10 minutes, etc., and just build that way. It's a very easy way to accumulate volume. Make sure your technique looks good, and then you just accumulate volume that way, and that's totally fine, right? And I think people can do that almost all the way into the open if it's a new skill that you're learning. And if you're like doing muscle ups, for example, 6 on the minute times 10 minutes, you probably never need to do a muscle up in a workout mixed with other things. Like that's you're going to be so good. It's going to be compared to last year. Keep working at that. Keep accumulating volume before you start mixing movements in.
So just in summary real quick. So Charlie asked, if you just go to class, then how can you, supplement your training, or how can you apply some of this? And CJ said, just so you know, that you can either work on your strength, which you most likely need to do. And if you have the strength for the movement, then you're going to work on the skill and technique work until you get the movement. And then when you have the movement, then you can very gradually begin to grow your capacity in that movement. And that would be your progression. And then you could go on to the next movement.
Yeah. Nailed it. Look at that. See, just not saying 30 seconds, 7 minutes.
I mean, but that's all very much around CrossFit and skills and like what you need to do. Now, 5 months is a very long time. How do you guys have any top tips on how to keep motivated, to keep accountable, to have fun? More importantly, this is a hobby. I always like to reiterate this. CrossFit is our hobby.
Sure.
We should be enjoying and having fun with it. Is there anything you guys would recommend? Just making this a super fun part of your lives, of CrossFitters' lives.
Sven, I think you're in that boat right now. Give us your kind of situation.
Me? What do I like to do?
Yeah.
I'm working out with class right now, which is always just fun. It's just fun to be with people. And if you're social and you like to joke around and that part is fun, I think that I have no issues whatsoever making a call for modifying a weight or a movement. Like, it just really doesn't affect me like it used to. I think there was an old CrossFit me that would never do that, no matter how I felt that day, no matter what. And I would just burn myself out. If I didn't feel great that day, it didn't matter. I would still throw down and get wrecked. And now I'm I don't really need to do that. I don't need to do that. And I think mentally you can save yourself some heartache, right? When you're having a hard day or whatever, and you just want to change something, just change it. And I tell my athletes in class the same thing. If you need to just what do you want to do? Within reason, have fun with your training. Don't take it too seriously so that you're going consistently, right?
Yeah.
I think if you're burning yourself out because you're too hard on yourself for how competitive you want to be, day after day after day after day, then it gets really tough. But if you are able to just take a step back every now and then, and you can have a little fun with it, or it's okay if, at our gym now, there are very large classes and not always the right amount of machines specifically. And to be okay saying, okay, this isn't the RX version of the workout, but I'll run, no big deal. You are still getting fitter, you are still having fun, and maybe you love running and that makes it a little bit more accessible to you. Like, I think that that's a really big thing.
Yeah, as long as it's not the assault bike, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, people will happily volunteer themselves to not bike, and I do not fault them for it. A few people I'll call out, but but you know, I think like actively try to not beat yourself into the ground mentally or physically. I think to me is the main thing, right? And I don't think that it's going to be fun every single day, but you can kind of find a little bit of something that you're looking forward to or a personal challenge in every workout every day. And you can, you can just have a good time, and that's okay. And you'll still get better.
I would build on what you've said and say, what's the thing for you where you consistently go? It's being able to consistently go to the gym that's going to give you that results, that progress that you want. And I know, just from I believe it's like you got to find out what works for you. Because some days you want to put your headphones on and you just want a bit of like me time. Some days you just want to hang out with everybody, be social, have a great time. And just understanding yourself and your body and what it needs that day for you to just keep turning up and just being there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also like kind of a robot when it comes to training, and I will never miss ever. But I think that was built over, however many 12 years of CrossFit and weightlifting, and you just show up, and you just need to be able to, like Charlie said, like what is going to allow you to show up every day or 5 days a week. Don't show up every day, please. Take a rest day. Please take a rest day.
What's a rest day?
Yeah, show up every day that you is a smart training day for you.
I mean, CJ? I have no idea. I have no idea what you do with your time if you don't go CrossFit.
Oh my God. Well, you get really anxious and you wish you were training, and then you have a great day the next day because you missed it. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on that, I think a good way, you two, again, are anomalies, and like you both love training. Not everyone does, right? Even people that go all the time, like they, and so for those that struggle with consistency, setting a goal, finding some short-term goals within the long-term goal, right? Working on a skill or getting stronger or starting a cycle of something, not testosterone or drugs or anything like that, like a training cycle. I mean, if that's you, whatever, just don't compete in that way. Teaches. So, but, finding some short-term goals are, important to maintain motivation. I think I have to do that a lot with athletes, and that's another reason why we run cycles and phases to not, completely bore everyone to death with 4 days of running every week, which a lot of people probably should do, but they don't want to do that, right? So, that's the beauty of CrossFit. It's always going to be different and fun, but within that little bit, like find some goals, things to work on, some small wins here and there, whether that's weight loss or size loss, as far as like your measurements,
or gains,
yeah, or growth, right? Or, like muscle growth and whatever it may be, right? Skill acquisition, whatever it is. There's lots of things that you can do that are going to continue to motivate. And that's one of the beauties of CrossFit, right? Is that it's changed our viewpoint on what exercise is for, right? Not to lose weight and be skinny, but to increase performance. And so you and everyone listening, even the best in the world, always have something to work on that isn't just getting ready for the CrossFit Games or the Open. Right? There's something specific everyone can work on.
And you can shift it at any time, okay? So, right. Like if you pick a goal and you're like, this is what I really want to do, and you're starting to get burnt out on that, and it's like becoming not fun, like it's great if you see it all the way through, right? That's amazing. But if you get a little burnt out along the way, there are 1,000 other things that you can just shift your focus to be excited and to love what you do. And if, and I think that that's okay too. And I think that's like, I think for me, that's the thing that's the best about CrossFit is you're like, all right, I'm going to focus on this. And you're like, okay, I've had enough of that. Now I'm going to like slightly focus on this. And each thing will get a little bit better. Or if it's your mindset, or if it's your nutrition, or if it's your skill work, or if it's your strength, but you can always stay engaged.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that note, I think there's a whole ton of tips and advice and support that people can be doing for the next 5 months, breaking up into cycles, working on skills, and most importantly, finding what's fun for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So thanks, everybody. That was another episode, and I hope you have a good day.
Bye.